Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the What the Fantasy Football Show. We got a lot of things to cover for you today, but first, I have to let you know that we're a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. We got 18 podcasts going and more adding all the time. Come out and check us out. You can find us at fulltimefantasy.com. All the different podcasts are listed there. You can listen to them all at the same time. So come on out and give us a listen. But first, before we get to anything else, we have to bring on the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Mr. Tony Cincotta.
You guys are in for a treat today. Of course, got Mike Blewitt, Jim Day, and myself. But today is the first time we're doing this thing in the morning. Usually we do this after the night, and there might be a couple beers, a couple substances in people. Today, there might be a coffee in somebody. Who the hell knows what's going to happen today? So you could be in for a treat. Mike, how's it going today?
Good, bud. I'm more of a morning guy these days because I have little kids, so I'm excited to get it going. And I quit caffeine a couple of months ago, so I'm just high on life.
Why did you quit caffeine? That's interesting.
I'm reading a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He's a sleep scientist, and I have sleep struggles. I have apnea, so I've had it for a long time. I snore like crazy and all that kind of stuff. Early on in the book, he rids the notion that caffeine is a positive thing for you. Granted, give you a little bit of a boost, but ultimately the half-life of caffeine and the impact it can have on your sleep and the impact of the crash of caffeine far outweighs the benefits.
Jim, I have all those sleep problems, probably 10 times worse. Maybe I should switch to crack.
Well, it sounds like it's a common theme for us all here. Sleep has not been my friend. You know, you get up in age and sleep becomes harder to do. But, it is what it is. I'm not a big caffeine guy anyway. I don't drink coffee or tea. Never have. It's weird. I love the smell of coffee beans when they're being ground. I love it. It's one of my favorite smells, but I just can't drink coffee.
I don't either. I never did. I just drank tea. Or I'd have a Coke Zero or something like that.
Well, for me, it was always Mountain Dew.
There you go, people. Can you relate to your host if you have sleeping problems? Don't get answers from us because we haven't figured it. But Mike is reading a book, so maybe in a couple of weeks we'll be able to figure this all out. I'll tell you what you try to figure out every year. I think fantasy football, a lot of people will stop preparing 6 months ahead of time. Some of us stop preparing the day after. Some are going 0-5, and they're trying to prepare for next season. But one common theme you'll hear on every podcast, every radio show, is you can wait on quarterbacks. You hear it every single show. Well, I'm looking at the quarterback standings right now, and in 6-point touchdown leagues, there's generally 5 or 6 points between the 1st and 12th. That's where I usually look. Because the 12th, of course, is the last starting quarterback in a 12-team league, and the 1st is the epitome. So if there's only 5 or 6 points, that's why people say you can wait, and you make up the 5 or 6 points there. But so far this year, the number one quarterback is Russell Wilson at 33.56 points per game. The number 12 quarterback, if you can believe this, is actually Gardner Minshew at 21.77. That's a 12-point difference, Mike. 12 points to start off right at the bat. Can you still wait on quarterbacks, Mike?
Well, we also have to take into account some of the guys that have been drafted early and busted. I guess you could say that really about every position, but I just think that there's way too much value late to worry about it. Minshew is a really good point in that you didn't have to draft him at all, and the guy's still putting up numbers. So, yeah, I'm going to continue to wait on it.
How about you, Jim, when you look at these quarterback numbers? We have 12 points difference. Mike makes a good point because guys that are not in the top 12 that would have went early, Aaron Rodgers is one. Matthew Stafford, who started out playing well, has played very well. He was a guy that was not picked there. You got a guy like who else is up here? Kyle Murray, depending on how you felt about him, is a guy for everybody out there. Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Matt Ryan, Lamar Jackson are the first 5 quarterbacks. When you look at that, Russell Wilson is a surprise. to a lot of people because they were supposed to be a running team, but he's always been a quality quarterback. I think everybody liked Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Matt Ryan's a guy in the Atlanta office you could see, and Lamar Jackson is running. So I don't know if there's a lot of surprises in the quarterbacks in the front five.
Well, look, you're talking about, drafting quarterbacks late, but I mean, Russell Wilson wasn't a quarterback that was drafted early.
Right.
You probably got him after round 8, round 9. In some cases, even later than that, depending on the draft. So, it is. There's so many talented quarterbacks now that is absolutely still okay to wait on drafting a quarterback. Look, Pat Mahomes, obviously first quarterback off the board, at least in my scoring. He's number 4 on the season so far. Again, I'm not complaining about Pat Mahomes. He's one of the few quarterbacks who's put up at least 20 points in every single game. Again, this is 4-point scoring, not 6-point. I don't think I have any leagues with 6-point QBs this year.
The amazing thing about Russ Wilson, too, Tony, is that last year we thought he played at an unsustainable level, and yet he continues to play at this unsustainable level. What he's doing is incredible behind an offensive line that isn't that great. 72.5% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns to no picks. And he's run 3 in as well. It's pretty amazing. The stats would just lead us all of us to believe that this has to run out at some point, but he's just at another level right now.
Russell Wilson was one of those guys that I believe didn't have sex before his second marriage. Jim, do you think he saved the legs situation that they used to do in boxing with not having sex the night before the matches helped Russell Wilson in his NFL career?
No, I don't think it's that. I think he just likes to be on the bottom.
Mike, you
said before his second marriage?
Yeah.
So he was celibate during his first marriage?
No. He was married, right?
Yeah.
And then he decided to get divorced.
Oh,
and then he was going to get married again.
He went celibate before the second.
Yeah. So I don't know if that counts.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's tough to claim something back that's already been taken from you. However, maybe it's given him fresh legs here in this his 8th season in the NFL or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's amazing. I still remember when the Seahawks signed Matt Flynn in the offseason, right?
Oh yeah,
it was a big signing, and then Russell Wilson comes into camp and beats him out, and everybody's like, "Who the hell is Russell Wilson?"
And he's so short; he's never going to be able to make it in this league.
Absolutely.
He was great in college, though.
He really was.
The height thing was a bigger deal back then. Obviously, he and Drew Brees, and now potentially Baker Mayfield, are trying to dispel that notion. But the height discussion was exactly, and that discussion was a real thing back then. These guys in particular are casting a new profile of a quarterback. It's not just about height and a huge arm. It's about accuracy and athleticism for those guys.
Now the one caveat to that I got to throw in there is that Baker Mayfield, he is short and everything, but he's the one having the most problem with it because he's getting too many passes batted down at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
He's having a hard time seeing his wide receivers over the middle of the field.
He's also less athletic than those other guys.
Well, that's what I mean. He hasn't learned yet how to move around in the pocket so he can get those clear lanes of vision, which, obviously Russell Wilson doesn't have a problem with. So far, it doesn't look like Kyler Murray's having much of an issue with it either. So it does, it doesn't work for everybody. Some guys have a lot of strength with it, some don't. So it'll really be interesting to see if Baker can grow into that to where he can learn to use his movement to create sight lines.
I kind of wonder, the more and more I watch Baker Mayfield play, if he knows the plays. And because he never looks for a second or third receiver. Like, he just hangs on that first receiver, and he's throwing it no matter what. Thus, we have 11 interceptions.
I mean, in the Big 12, he didn't really have to be a multiple read guy. Everybody was running wide open. So, in that sense, he's getting used to it.
I'll tell you what.
But the only other thing I'll add to that is, for me, it looks like he's just afraid because of that offensive line.
Should be.
Early in this, right. Early in the season, he looked, a little bit more comfortable. Now, the last few games, I mean, he is very sketchy behind that offensive line. He looks like he has no trust in them whatsoever. He's willing to bail out from behind them at every moment. And half the time he does that, it creates mistakes for him. He's got to, either they have to get that offensive line back up to a level that's sustainable, or he's going to have a rough time of it.
Tony, there were two concerns that those of us that were sort of fading the Browns had. It's the offensive line and the head coach, and those things are at the forefront of their issues right now.
Even early in the season when Baker Mayfield was good, right? Odell Beckham, he would just throw the ball to every play. He didn't look at everyone else, and then every once in a while he'd throw the ball to Ricky Seals-Jones, and it was like one of those great things.
The Jets game was very indicative of that.
Yeah, and then you're saying, man, you got Jarvis Landry. If the one guy ain't open, can't you find the other guy? And then after a couple games of that, Odell Beckham got good coverage in the third game, and he just singled on Jarvis Landry. We've never seen them both.
I agree.
Be involved in the game.
Totally. It switched from Beckham to Landry. Then Landry has a couple of good games. Then it'll probably go back to Beckham. We're just he's hanging on. We haven't seen success out of multiple receivers yet with Baker
in one game, right? Now the caveat you got to add to that is how much is Odell Beckham wishing he had Eli Manning right now?
Or Danny J.
You got a couple more weeks in the trade deadline, so maybe Eli could be a Cleveland Brown. See if that shakes out. Last thing on the Cleveland Browns, Freddie Kitchens has a bye week this week, and then it's Freddie Kitchens versus Bill Belichick. And I was thinking about this. I could see Freddie Kitchens beating Bill Belichick in maybe a chicken wing eating contest. I don't see him beating him in anything else in his entire life.
It's a no contest.
Yeah, really. It's obvious that Kitchens has a lot to learn to be as a head coach. There's no doubt about that. I don't think anybody would argue that. Could he grow into it? Sure. It took Belichick a while to get to be a head coach, and Kitchens no time at all to get there. So, totally different learning curve. Belichick had a lot better people around him before he became a head coach to get to that level. Yeah, I think Kitchens was just elevated a little too quickly.
By the way, everybody's been a good citizen right now on the Browns.
Yeah, that's not going to hold for long.
That's right. That's what
I keep saying that.
This is the easiest it's going to get for him, and it's not going well.
Beckham is going to implode here soon.
I put a poll on Twitter this week for everybody out there at the Tony Cincotta. In 2023, who do you see as a better NFL quarterback, Gardner Minshew or the Carolina Panthers' Kyle Allen? It was actually close. Kyle Allen won 52 to 48%. Jim.
Oh, that's a joke.
Who do you think is the better quarterback in 2023?
Minshew easily. Look, I'm not putting anything against Kyle Allen. He's won all 4 of the games he started this year. Heck, he won the game he started last year, too. That's fine. But he has so much more talented weapons around him than Minshew does. And Minshew is playing better football. He just is. Just so many things to like about him. Is he a finished product? Absolutely not. Still, he has a ton to learn. But the fact of the matter is the man is fearless. He stands in that pocket knowing a hit is coming, and he waits till the very last second to let the ball go. I love that in a quarterback. The fact that he can throw the ball downfield without worrying about it, he has no issues doing it, and he has pinpoint accuracy. Those are things that can't be taught. Kyle Allen doesn't have that yet.
What's your thoughts, Mike? Kyle Allen or Gardner Minshew in 2023?
Well, as Kyle Allen is undefeated as a professional quarterback, I'd say if he remains undefeated, we'll consider him to be better in 2023. I tend to side with Jim. What I've been thinking about in relation to these two guys is, as Nick Foles is coming back from this injury and Cam Newton is coming back from his injury, when Cam Newton's healthy and ready to go, he's going to be back in. As the season goes on for the Jaguars and say they're still competing for the division or playoff spot in the AFC, I think they will have no problems keeping Foles on the bench for the remainder of the year in an effort to get him, quote, completely healthy and let Minshew play it out and then figure out what to do in the offseason, which is likely dealing Foles in some way. I know, Tony, you posited the potential of maybe moving Minshew because lightning in a bottle and all of that. Maybe he isn't what this first month has told us about, but that's the way I'm thinking of it. I think when you look at these two guys, one is a clear starter right now, and Allen is doing a really good job. Could he get a starting job elsewhere? I think it's possible, but I don't think any of these teams that are tanking or not even trying to tank but are really bad, I don't think any of them would pass up on a first-round quarterback for Kyle Allen.
You know what's surprising to me is that you think Cam Newton will get that job back. Yeah. I look at that Carolina offense, and the receivers haven't played that well with Cam Newton at quarterback since, I don't know, they were in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And Christian McCaffrey's playing better. Jim, this Carolina team looks a lot better than a 30-year-old Cam Newton at quarterback.
Yeah, just because they're letting Kyle Allen be a game manager and not somebody that they're putting the game on his shoulders. When Cam's in there, you have a tendency to put the game on Cam's shoulders and let him do what he does. And I'm kind of with you. I'm on the fence here. Not that I think Kyle Allen is that great a quarterback. I really don't. But Cam Newton just hasn't looked right in a while at this point. He doesn't look like he has the arm strength he used to have. He's obviously not running as much. They don't want him to. And that takes a little bit of the effect of him off as well. But I do think that when he gets back and they deem him healthy, that he is going to be back into that starting role. But I'm not sure I love it.
Do you think Cam Newton has physical and mental problems, Mike? He wears some weird outfits, and he's now a vegan. Do you think mentally he's
vegan,
been hit?
Really?
Yeah, he switched up. He's vegan now.
It's an odd choice for a football player considering the amount of protein that you need. But
well, maybe that's why he's hurt all the time.
So the outfits are an odd choice. Can't defend them. I appreciate somebody pushing the envelope on fashion, but I think the Sunday church hats are a bit much and the scarves are a bit much for me. That being said, the thing that concerned me most about all of the Cam Newton stuff during the offseason was the talk about changing his throwing motion.
Yeah.
And once I heard that, I was like, that's a bad call. It's either a bad call because we heard the same thing about Andrew Luck having to relearn a throwing motion, how Andrew Luck changed his throwing motion to account for his other injuries, and it resulted in him basically blowing up his shoulder. And that's what concerned me about Cam. I didn't get anywhere near him during drafts. As we talk about QBs, you have many options you can wait, and I just didn't go anywhere near him. Even when I waited and he was going late, I just thought that this could be a bad deal. I didn't know he was going to be out for a month plus in the middle of the season, but it's what concerns me for this year and going forward. It just has, unfortunately, the same looks as Andrew Luck's situation did.
I think he's absolutely done. And I'll go back to the year he won the most valuable player. He only completed 57% of his passes, right?
You were not a supporter of him that year.
Yeah, never. No. 57% of his passes. It was third worst among starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So you get 30 years of age. You can't keep running the ball. And that was his biggest asset. He's taken a beating. He's had a good career. But, Jim, I don't see this guy being a reliable NFL starting quarterback anymore.
Well, look, I had the same concerns as Mike, and we talked about it in the preseason. Trying to change somebody's throwing motion at that age is one of the toughest things to do because, once he gets in the heat of fire, he's just going to go back to doing it the way he's done it always, all his life. So I wasn't a big fan of that. I did 137 real drafts and didn't draft him once.
Wow, not once. Even 2 quarterback leagues, no Cam Newton.
No Cam Newton. I made sure to stay away from him this year. I just didn't like all that conversation. I love the players he has around him. No doubt. He's got 2 great young receivers in Samuels and DJ Moore. And, of course, you got McCaffrey there. But, even with all of that, I just couldn't get behind him. And I'm glad I didn't.
Well, the last quarterback we'll talk about is not really a quarterback, but it's a team situation. We had a one-day holdout from wide receiver Stephon Diggs 2 weeks ago. Then he goes off for 40 fantasy points this week. Adam Thielen had back-to-back big games. Dalvin Cook's been big throughout the whole season. Jim, is there enough fantasy points for all these guys, or are we going to see Stephon Diggs go off one week, Dalvin Cook go off the next week, just because they got a lot of superstars and not enough balls for all these guys?
Well, it really comes down to play calling. I mean, early in the season, it was run, 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 run. That was all we were going to do, and everything else didn't matter. And we saw that with Kirk Cousins really not getting anything done. Only had 3 passing touchdowns through the first 4 games, including none against the Bears in Week 4. But then, once they got to the Giants, all of a sudden they decided they were going to become more dynamic. They were calling play action passes. They were moving the players around, things they weren't doing early on. And I think that, they just realized that they need to get this passing game more involved. There's no doubt about it. Half of their team's salary is invested in their quarterback and their 2 big receivers. They need to get these guys as part of the game plan. And, I know it was against the Giants, and then last week it was against the Eagles, and they got more into the passing game and were successful with it. They do have, a couple of tougher matchups coming up, but this has got to be their game plan. They have to have realized that they're much more dynamic when they're doing it this way, where they're getting the passing game involved. Because even with that, the play action pass to Cooks has been huge in these last 2 weeks because of it. And I think they're realizing that they can absolutely utilize him that way as well as not just running the ball.
What's your thoughts, Mike, on this Minnesota offense? I'll tell you what, it was funny to watch. They were up by 2 touchdowns very late in the game against Philadelphia, and the coaching staff was a little slow getting the play in. And Kirk Cousins went like a little kid that didn't get a bicycle on Christmas. And I was dying laughing at this guy.
So the one thing I'll say about him is he has played well when he's under the most scrutiny. But to Jim's point about the way the offense is currently engineered, they're still dead last in the league in pass attempts, and their touchdown to interception ratio is 13-7. So if you're going to not throw the ball that much, your interception total needs to look like what Russell Wilson's looked like. He hasn't thrown one yet. So what we saw from Cousins.
Wait. Beck,
yeah.
Cousins only has what? He only has 3 interceptions.
The team. I'm seeing. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm doing the league ranks. That was 13th in the league to 7. So sorry, 9-3 touchdown to interception ratio. My point remains. They're not pushing the ball down the field at all via the pass. And whether it's the 8 of 10 game in week 1, which put a damper on those number of attempts, I think what we saw from his play in the game subsequent to that first game were overthrows, was inaccuracy, Thielen having frustrations, Diggs having frustrations. I actually understand it. They may be well paid and everything, but I think they know in order to be a winning team, a team that's going to compete for championships, they're going to need to throw the ball more than the least amount of attempts in the whole league.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah, and and look, if you're those receivers, absolutely you want to be involved, and I agree totally with everything you said, because you can't just be a running team anymore in the NFL and win. You just can't.
You can't be, but it's going to be interesting in the offseason because I think the biggest they can't do nothing about it now, but the biggest thing is the mistake that they made as a franchise is they got a very good defense, and yet all that money is tied up in the quarterback and the 2 wide receivers. I think they're going to have to move one of those guys and get some
only
balance.
One more year on Cousins.
Yeah, I get some balance there. Well, the quarterback position in the NFL, I think Kirk Cousins gets a lot of heat from people, but he's at least somewhere in the middle of the quarterbacks in the NFL. I think they'd be hurting if they let him go. We saw what happened in Minnesota before he got there.
Yeah. What about what about Kyle Allen?
Yeah, right.
In purple?
Yeah, let's get Kyle Allen in there. By the way, Cam's only got 1 year left on his deal after this too.
The one mistake I think they really made was bringing in Kevin Stefanski as offensive coordinator, because we know that he just wants to run the ball to death. That's always been his MO. He comes in, he just wants to grind it out on the ground all game long. And I'm sorry, but the NFL has passed that. We just have. It's a passing game now, and I don't care how good your defense is, how good you can run the ball. If that's all you're doing, the other team's defenses will shut you down.
I miss the days. And Mike, we had this conversation 4 or 5 years ago when we were watching the games, and I've said this NFL is terrible. It's like a video game, right? Everybody goes back to pass. You complete 70% of your passes, and it's just insane what the defenses have to go through to try to stop someone. And if you do stop someone, someone drops a flag because you hit the quarterback or you poked a lineman in the face. And it's become a joke, but it is what it is. It's what we got. Everything changes. Some things for the good, some things for the bad. And Jim's right. All the rules are geared to passing. You got to go that way.
I agree. I think you have to be leaning towards that. Now, there's some coaches that came out. It was Bill Callahan came out talking about establishing the run, which was, it was just dropping a joke bomb in the middle of fantasy football Twitter for them to go crazy on him when he's talking about establishing the run. You just have to maintain accuracy in the passing game and be pushing the ball downfield. I think that some teams and coordinators have mistaken, well, let's go for a higher level of accuracy, but we can do it close to the line of scrimmage. That also isn't going to work in the long term. That's why we often, as analysts, are talking about at air yards and average yards per attempt and net yards per attempt. That is something that's really important. We've even seen good quarterbacks like Carson Wentz where that's regressed some for him because he's missing and the huge over-the-top piece in Deshaun Jackson. It's not just about accuracy, throwing the ball. They have to continue to push the ball downfield. It doesn't mean you can't run. The Rams ran it unbelievably last year and pushing the ball downfield. It's just I think Jim hit on the biggest point in Minnesota. They have a coordinator, now their third one in 3 years, that is wanting to run the ball. Great for Dalvin Cook, and he's looked great. But this isn't going to work for them to win a championship if they're doing it like this.
It's interesting. When I think about the running back position, we always try to score running backs early in the draft because there ain't enough running backs that get the whole backfield to themselves. I think about 5-6 years ago, I was picking wide receivers early in the draft because I found there was greater reliability. But it seems like now, Jim, everybody gets injured. And you look at the top 7 running backs, there's 2 that I'm very concerned about. David Johnson, who's in a great offense, but he's dealing with back issues, and we're seeing the emergence of his backup. Alvin Kamara looks like he's finally getting beat up without Mark Ingram there. And maybe they didn't use Latavius Murray enough early in the season, Jim, and I'm concerned about David Johnson and Alvin Kamara. It's hard to trade those 2 guys and get a running back of equal value, but what are your thoughts on these 2 players?
Well, it definitely concerns. Like you said, David Johnson has been dealing with back issues for years, so it's definitely not good to hear that coming up now. But, it like you said, you can't trade him now because you're not going to get anything for him. He's still a top 5 or 6 running back, depending on your scoring system.
Yeah.
Kamara, still top 10.
Yep.
But Kamara right now looks to be the bigger concern because they went out and signed Zach Zenner yesterday or day before. My timeline shot in my head. But over the last 2 days, they've signed Zach Zenner, which is not a good sign for Kamara this week. He was already dealing with the ankle issue, and then early in this past game, you could see his knee got bent the wrong way, and he came on and he played through the rest of the game and played well, not bad, but obviously there is concern now. So after the game, they probably had some more issues with it, and they're still dealing with it. There's a good possibility he doesn't play this week.
Good possibility. What's crazy? We live in a screwed up world, and
amen.
People will bring this up in the Donald Trump portion of the show. Do you know right now in football, I would say that most people would think the National Football League is about 95% African American. No. And would you say that?
No. It's not that high.
Give me a number.
I'd say it's between 60 and 65%.
Really?
Yeah. That's what it's been historically.
Jim, what do you think? You think it's that?
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. Maybe 70% at tops, but yeah, it's somewhere around there.
It could be we could have this year, right now, the top wide receiver, the top running back, and the top quarterback in fantasy football all white players. It reminds me of the day of the Boston Celtics.
It's the old school Celts. They had Robert Parrish and DJ.
Right? Cooper Kupp is number four in wide receiver. And if you throw out Deshaun Jackson, he's number 3 points per game. Christian McCaffrey's the number 1 running back. And Russell Wilson, I'm confused about.
Yeah. Let's not go there. I'm not really big into talking race. Well, I really don't care what the color of a person's skin is. I never did, never will. Grew up in a town that was predominantly black. Didn't bother me in the least. Still have some great friends from those days. And I hate race discussions. It's so BS. Who cares what the color of a person's freaking skin is?
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Jim, is a lot of people complain about it in sports, right? And usually there's nothing to be found about, like, that number 60-65 is interesting. And in Major League Baseball, it's only 8%. Like, yeah. I think people make a bigger deal out of these things than it actually is.
Well, it's even less than that in National Hockey League.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely insane what goes on there. So interesting there. And we're talking about wide receivers. And I'll tell you what, this Cooper Kupp situation is interesting because the offensive line has been so poor for the Rams, and you have 2 other quality wide receivers there in Woods and Brandon Cooks, and yet Cooper Kupp, 20 points per game, Mike. You see him keeping it up?
I think we've talked about it here a bunch. Well, first of all, they're having major offensive line issues. The Jalen Ramsey trade, I think, is interesting for them, but I actually don't think it's going to work out for them in terms of rebuilding or trying to build back to a championship team. That's part one. But part two is I think we've seen this offense does run through Kupp in the passing game. I think it's the guy that Goff is most comfortable with. I think Brandon Cooks, unfortunately, has become a luxury for them. I know they paid him a lot of money, but he's not being utilized in the way that he needs to. And I think they're going to have to deal probably somebody like Brandon Cooks, who's a high-priced receiver who could still fetch potentially decent return, because this team is way too top-heavy, especially if they have to pay Jalen Ramsey now. And I think Kupp in this offense, both this year and in years to come, will be a staple.
I'll tell you what, Jim, it's interesting because you look at the Rams situation, and I wonder how the heck they can afford all these star players. But we talk about it in fantasy, stars and scrubs, right? That's what we got going on with the Rams.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, untalented players on that team, I would imagine. But the one thing is that Mike hit on it, that Goff obviously trusts Kupp the most. He just does. I mean, outside of this past week against the 49ers, where he only had 6 targets in that game, but nothing was working for them in that game at all. San Francisco just shut them down right from the start. But besides that week, I mean, you're looking at Kupp as a guy who's been averaging about 12.5 targets a game. You give somebody that much opportunity, and he's going to put up good points. And like Mike said, even last year when Kupp was healthy, he was their number one. And that hasn't changed this year with him being healthy. So it's obvious that Goff really has eyes for Kupp.
Who's the biggest surprise to you at wide receiver, Jim? Is it Terry McLaurin of the Washington Redskins or Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys? Gallup right now is averaging 17 fantasy points per game, and McLaurin 18 fantasy points per game. Who do you think is the biggest surprise?
Oh, it's got to be McLaurin. As a rookie coming into a terrible team, it's got to be him. No doubt about it for me. I like the kid coming out of college. I thought he would eventually work into something, but he's shown us right away that, he's there. He's that guy already. He's ready to jump right in and be a major part of an offense. And, I love that about him. And, it has the opportunity to even get better if they get Dwayne Haskins on the field and he's a competent QB, because they have history together. They played together in college. They know each other well. So it even has a possibility of getting even better from McLaurin going forward. Gallup, look, Gallup's been playing outstanding football. I'm not taking anything away. He's already dealing with, dealt with some injuries early in the season, but he's had a year to do this. So he's in year 2. McLaurin as a rookie has to be the bigger surprise.
I'll tell you what, McLaurin's playing better in the pros than he did in college, Mike. Is this sustainable?
Well, I think Jim made a good point in that I actually thought McLaurin could be a really good asset, but when Haskins came in, because they had played together, I think you make a point about him at Ohio State. There was some buzz about McLaurin coming into the draft, but not enough to get him picked in the first round, right? His teammate Paris Campbell. I think there's just not enough balls around to go around at Ohio State for these guys to prove how good they are. We didn't think Michael Thomas was going to be the best receiver in the NFL coming out of Ohio State. He did. Keyshawn Johnson, his uncle, did, but we didn't necessarily think that. And here you are. I have to give McLaurin a lot of credit. They're obviously been in blowouts, and he's seeing some targets in some games just because they have to throw to try to get back into it. But I have to give him a lot of credit. He is not working with Haskins on the field, and he's easily their best receiver.
Yeah, a lot of people thought McLaurin could play, but this is what he did in college. As a sophomore at Ohio State, his first year, he had 0 catches. He redshirted. He had 11 catches his